What happened is that, so Israel went to war with Hamas. And what occurred at that point was, this was a very intense war. This was the real deal, right? So there were over, I would say probably, upwards about 5,000 missiles, maybe a little bit more. You can check to see. The IDF has like a specific number that you can probably go and find. Yeah. I think it's somewhere in the 5,000 range. So I was in like central Israel, which is kind of the Tel Aviv metro area, which is kind of more central Israel. So what would happen is that the embassy evacuated its personnel, right? So the embassy evacuated. And in my situation, there was no way I was going to evacuate. There was just absolutely no way that I was leaving. No chance. And the reason is because the newspapers and the press in the Middle East really kind of, under this disability section, it had turned into such a powerful message that a lot of these publications kind of, in fact, the Jerusalem Post, ran a story about how, I had become the face of this, right? So they had said, like, this is the human face of peace. This is the human face of the Abraham Accords. This is the human face of what happens when people work together. This is the human face of a better life, right? For folks who literally just didn't have one. But this was the human face for people who otherwise literally thought that these kind of things were not possible. And the reason that's significant is that if you put yourself in that situation where you're becoming the human face, as the Jerusalem Post kind of pointed out, you can't leave. You just can't leave, right? What would that do? What would that do if you leave? You're the human face of this, and now all of a sudden there's a war and you leave. You can't do that. You want to do this kind of stuff, you got to do this kind of stuff, right? You want to do this, you do it. This isn't fun and games. This isn't, oh, this is interesting. Oh, let me try this out. I've been doing this kind of work my entire life. You're going to do this, you do it seriously, right? And you understand the risk, and you understand the difficulties and the challenges that come out of it. But you don't mess around with this. The stakes are high. You don't mess with this, right? So if they're telling you that you become the human face of this, and you're going to have to work through this war, then you're going to work through the war. That's just all there is to it. There's no like complaining about it. There's no like, oh my God, it's a war. Oh, you can't do that. You believed in a cause. You believed in a purpose. You believed in a mission. You're going to ride it out. And that's just all there was to it. And what would happen is that every night there'd be hundreds of missiles that would be shot. And what would occur is you had 90 seconds to get to the bomb shelter. So, for me being blind, this was a little bit more challenging because I can't, it's hard, right? You can't just navigate. So people have to navigate you and get you there, but you can't. I mean, I'm a marathon runner, but it's the navigation, and you have like hundreds of people running for a bomb shelter. So you can't just you got to navigate around all of that. And what would happen is this went on for 12 days. And what would happen is that the siren would go off, and you would have 90 seconds to make it to the shelter. 90 seconds. So people would have to kind of help carry you and move you because you couldn't just do that on your own. So you get to the shelter, and what you have to realize is, for someone who can't see, your other senses are much heightened. They're just higher, right? And so what would happen is you would hear the missiles, like there were hundreds of them. So you would hear the missiles as they were coming. And a missile, like when you have a lot of them, they make a certain sound. It's like a woo, and you hear it. Like, because what you're hearing is the missile, these missiles don't have guidance systems, they just launch them. So what happens is that the missiles, as they're coming, you can hear them as they're falling. And you hear the woo, woo, and they make this like stinging, it's kind of like a singing noise. And then what you hear is the sound of Israel's Iron Dome. And the Iron Dome is basically, it's an interceptor missile. And what the interceptor missile does is the interceptor missiles basically get launched and it goes boom. And the sound is like, it's like really intense. Cause like when the interceptor gets launched, what's happening is it's just like boom. And it's this very, very intensive vibration that goes through your whole body. Because basically you hear the oof. And then because the missiles, the launchers are all kind of in close proximity to you because they have to have they have a lot of launchers and they launch these interceptors and you hear the oof, and it's being launched in very close proximity to where you are. So you hear the missiles as they're falling, and then you hear the interceptor, the oof, and then what happens is the interceptor collides with the missiles that are heading kind of in your direction. And you hear this boom. I mean, it's massive. It's boom. I mean, it's a sound I can't explain. It's boom. And then what happens is that the entire shelter violently shakes. Like it's because you've had two missiles that have collided in a very close proximity to where you are. And then what happens is this violent. Like it's not just a small shake, it's like a violent, it's just violence. And it's just your whole body shakes as like you feel it. And then that just goes on all night long. And then like the day comes, and the day was sometimes a little bit quieter because it was harder for Hamas to launch the missiles during the day. So the day would be a little quieter, and it wouldn't be as intense. But they would still do a lot of missiles during the day too. So basically for 12 days, you had to spend in a very close proximity to the bomb shelter because you couldn't be far away. Because what would happen is even when the interceptor missile would collide with the missiles that were coming in your direction, what would happen is that missile, it would lose its power, but all the wreckage would still fall. So if you were outside and not close to a shelter, the wreckage would still come down. It wouldn't do as much damage, but the wreckage would still fall. So yeah, you had to ride that out. And it was just one of those situations where there was some real discussion about what was the future of the Abraham Accords going to be? You know, what was the future of the peace agreements going to be? And what was going to happen as a result of it? Because there was a lot of pressure put on the Arab countries to kind of pull out.